What's up, everybody? Episode number 36 of the Big Five Pod coming at you right now. I'm your co-host, Kyle Morello, and next to me, my other co-host, Jake Copestick. Cope, a lot of college basketball to talk about. It is baseball opening day today. Phil's blew a disgusting lead. The Mets did win. They're very good on opening day, but hopefully it keeps it going for the season. But for the college sports, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great. As far as the Phils go, I got back from work and took like a 3 4 hour nap as soon as I got back. So I think I picked a good one to sleep through today.
Yeah.
Because when I was driving home, I think they were up 4 or 5-0. So I think I picked, like I said, I think I picked a good one to sleep through. There'll be 161 more I can maybe tune into. But yeah, crazy. We've had no games, and we still have a ton to talk about. A lot of coaching news. The transfer portal starting to work itself out gradually. There's over 1,000 players in it, but Nick Jourdain just committed today that we'll talk about. You're now starting to see guys not only enter, but commit as well. So we're starting to get a little more clarity there. And regardless, a whole lot to talk about, even without any games being played.
Oh yeah. I mean, looking at our note sheet right now, it's like almost a little overwhelming how much we have to talk about, but it's exciting. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it. Here we go. Obviously, the big news of this week in Big Five land is multiple facets of what's going on with Temple University. There is, we're going to get into it. There's just a lot. First and foremost, Temple had a head coaching vacancy. It took 2 weeks to fill, but it is now filled, and it is being filled by someone we've mentioned on the pod a couple of times now. Adam Fisher, who is the associate head coach of Penn State, is coming to North Broad to take over for Aaron McKee. I think you and I both agree that this is a great hire. I really, really like this, except the process to which this happened was very, very abnormal, confusing, frustrating. Whatever adjective you want to describe is what it was. So we're going to break this down a little bit for you right here. First of all, there were some people who we thought either were going to interview or did interview that did not end up interviewing. Obviously, Pat Chambers was one of them we talked about. The biggest one and the one that made the most sense all along, and I'm still confused why it didn't happen, was Matt Langle of Colgate, obviously. Brewster Flint also never interviewed for the job. And this is all according to an article written by Sean Pastor of Owls Daily. So shout out to Sean Pastor. Um, and then there was also the Charlton Young situation. If those of you who are unfamiliar or those who want a quick recap, Charlton Young's the associate head coach at the University of Missouri. And there was reports on, this was Wednesday, I believe.
Yeah, yesterday.
Yes, that he was offered the job by Arthur Johnson and Temple. And then about an hour later, it was another report came out that he withdrew his name from the head coaching job. It was all very strange. And in this too, Temple's president, Jason Wingard, submitted his letter of resignation. So he is no longer the Temple president. So not only did they have a vacancy in the head coaching department of college basketball team, but they had a vacancy as the president of the university, which is obviously a much, much bigger deal. And that was one of the reasons that this was a John Rothstein tweet that we both saw that was cited that he did not want to come anymore. And then they ended up pivoting to Adam Fisher just a few hours later, which again, I really, really like the hire. He started his career in the Big Five. He was a grad assistant under Jay Wright, 07 to 09, obviously that 09 team making the Final Four. And they had some success there. He was also, like I said, Penn State grad. He was video coordinator for them. He was director of player development 2011, 2012. He ended up going down to Miami in 20. Well, first he was at Boston University, then went down to Miami, had some success there. They had 4 straight 20-win seasons with him and Coach Larinaga, obviously. He recruited Lonnie Walker. He recruited Isaiah Wong, bunch of guys. And then he goes to Penn State under Micah Shrewsbury. And obviously you saw the success they had this past season, and they had a pretty successful 2021 campaign as well. He's been a pretty good recruiter. They had a top 30 class this past year. And he's from around here. He's from Jameson, Pennsylvania, which is in Warrenton, a CB West area. For those of you who are familiar, I know we both are. But this guy, I think it's a really good hire. He does have connections in the Northeast, and I was afraid that they weren't going to hire someone like that. Um, it's just the process that this all unfolded was very, very strange. So I want to hear your thoughts on this because it was just a very, very interesting way to do things for Arthur Johnson and company.
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely is a weird process, I guess. It didn't seem like there was a lot of clarity. It seemed like there was a lot of conflicting reports. There was names thrown out there that said, hey, these people have interviewed on Zoom. Seems like they're going to come on campus for a visit. And that's why we talked to Pat Chambers in like the last episode, because I really thought that if he got an interview, they would bring him on campus, they would hire him. We'll throw that out the window because he never even got an interview. The whole time, everybody's begging and screaming, just offer the job to Matt Langle. He'll probably take it. They didn't even want to reach out to him. So there's that. That's the most confusing part to me, is that I think if you just called Matt Langle, you wouldn't have even needed to interview anybody else. He probably would have. But regardless, very happy with this Adam Fisher news that he's going to be the head coach at Temple. Haven't heard a bad thing about him. Seems like guys love playing for him. Guys love, his work on the recruiting trail, his work in player development, worked in a lot of different areas. He's actually a guy, when he was at Boston University, he worked under Pat Chambers as well. So kind of a disciple from him, as well as Jay Wright. So it's important that he's got the connections to the city, some that Carl Hobbs doesn't really have. And then the same goes for a Charlton Young, who he doesn't have connections here. He was at Northeastern for a little bit, but it's all the way up in Boston. And besides that, he doesn't have any ties here. And the main thing is, if you look at what's happened with Temple, they need to keep the best guys home. They need to keep the best players in Philadelphia here. Tyseer Miller was the only guy from Philadelphia on the team this past year. Now, I know they had a Zach Hicks from Camden, but you got to keep the best guys home. And although Adam Fisher hasn't had a position in Philadelphia at a Big Five school, he's been able to get Philadelphia guys to play for him wherever he's at. You look down in Miami, you mentioned Lonnie Walker and Isaiah Wong. Wooga Poplar's been playing very well for them. He got him to go down there. And then when he's at Penn State, last year they get Sam Sessoms from Binghamton to transfer in. He's now at Coppin State, was one of the leading scorers in D1, right up there with Jelly Walker and Jordan Dingle. And he gets Jameel Brown, who was one of the top players in the state of Pennsylvania, only appeared in 14 games as a freshman, went to Westtown, and then didn't really play at Penn State, but he had a lot of guys ahead of him, including, Jalen Pickett and Funk and Cam Winter, who are fifth-year guys. But now you have Jameel Brown in the portal. Potentially you have one of the top guys in the state from last year to come have a reunion with Adam Fisher. So you need a guy who can – look, half the battle is you need good players. He's demonstrated the ability wherever he's been to help you get those good players. And I think now that he's in Philadelphia, shown a track record of being able to recruit guys from here, he'll bring them to Temple. Maybe we see a bit of a resurgence as they keep the best players home. People start to get more invested in the program, and they can continue to ascend here and start to make some tournaments. So, although it was a long process, a winding process, not a whole lot of transparency. I feel like we were just kind of kept in the dark until we got a report from Al Scoop that's like, hey, he's on campus. He's finalizing the deal to become the next head coach. It seemed like we really didn't know. But regardless of all that, 16-day process, with all of that I said, I think you got to be very happy with the result.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's almost like, when we were in like high school or college or even before that, whatever, you're taking a math test and you get the answer. You see all the wrong all the wrong processes to get there. That's almost what this was like for this process. I mean, it was just so strange, but you know what? I got the end result. So I guess that's all that really matters.
Excuse me. Tuesday afternoon, Temple announced that its president, Jason Wingard, would be stepping down on Friday. According to Johnson, meaning Arthur Johnson, of course, Young, meaning Charlton Young, of course, eventually went back to Missouri without an offer from Temple, but sources with knowledge of the proceedings suggest otherwise. Attempts to reach Young for comment were unsuccessful at the time of this report. Then it talks about how Adam Fisher was brought back to Temple late Wednesday morning, and then by that afternoon had agreed to be head coach. So hopefully we can get some sort of transparency, because see a guy like John Rothstein or a Jeff Goodman who has a huge following like that, they report something false that might not be true, and it makes Temple look horrible in the. So hopefully there's some that can get cleared up and we can figure out what happened. But the more I read into it, the more that the whole Charlton Young thing doesn't, like that whole situation that he was offered it and then within an hour or so said he didn't want it because of the administration. It doesn't necessarily seem like it's true.
No, I just don't think that that's actually what happened. Now I don't know what happened. I don't know what the what the whole process of that was with Charlton Young. I don't know exactly where that came from, but yeah, it was very, very strange. But you know what? Like I said, the end result was fine. We got our guy. Well, Langle was our guy, I think. We got one of our guys who I think is going to have success. I do think he's going to have success. Hopefully he's a better recruiter than Aaron McKee was. And obviously hope he was a better basketball coach too. But and the added benefit is McKee's still in the program. He's going to be an advisor for the program, for the athletic department, not just with basketball, but obviously he'll probably have an emphasis on basketball. He obviously knows it best, but if he's ever feeling overwhelmed or whatnot, he can always lean on Aaron McKee, who's been in the position and obviously understands Philadelphia very, very well. So overall, I do think this is a really good hire, but uh yeah, I'm just also looking at this Jason Wingard stuff too. I mean, this is crazy. I want to get into this real quick before we move on to some more basketball stuff. Temple's president obviously resigning. And there was a lot of reasons why people wanted him out. Enrollment was declining. There was grad students who were on strike this past year. And the biggest thing, and to be fair to him, not just the Temple thing, it's a Philadelphia thing. Violence, and particularly gun violence, has been through the roof since he took over. It obviously did not get any better at Temple as well. I think it's probably for the best. I don't think this was, they gave it a good try. They did give it a good try with him, but he did not do many things that were really, really good for the university. And I think that it's best for them to move on. So I just want to hear your thoughts real quick before we move on to some more basketball stuff, because this is something, I know it's not basketball, but it is Big Five related, and it's very, very important because obviously the president kind of dictates how the tone of the entire university goes.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's still very important and huge news. And I think you're right. I think what happened here that he sort of mentioned was it just seemed like there was so much scrutiny towards him that he was becoming a distraction to the university almost. So it was just in the best interest of both parties to part ways here and for him to move on. So I believe it's going to be a collective group of advisors and people on the board at Temple that are going to kind of act as the university president until they can find one. But yeah, not just kind of a tumultuous tenure. Ultimately, of course, you hitting it right on the head with the violence being so bad around campus, which again, absolutely right to his I guess it's not something you can put squarely on him. But when you see enrollment declining like that, you see parents that have to hire private security for their blocks that their children live on. It doesn't reflect well in him being the university's leader. And then of course recently, I mean we had the first ever, unfortunately, Temple University police officer that was killed in the line of duty. And it's just getting to a point where it's out of control. So it's a shame because I know me and you both, if we talk anytime we're going to talk about Temple University, the professors we had there, the people we met there, we'll say nothing. We'll talk glowingly about them. We won't say a bad. I can't think of a bad thing to say about any of the professors or my time there in the classroom at Temple. I enjoyed every single minute of it. It's just the fact that it's unique. It's in the middle of a very, very big city, and in particular, it's not in a great area of a very big city. There's a lot of violence that happens outside there, but at the same time, Wingard had talked about doing all these things to improve that, help out with that. How do we lower the violence going on? How do we make it safer for students? And unfortunately, it just didn't seem like there was a lot of action, or at least more importantly, results to back all that up. So it's unfortunate it has to happen right now because there's so much going on there. But I do think it was necessary just for both parties to kind of be done with each other and part ways.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was definitely for the best. There's really not much else to say. I mean, it was a tumultuous 10 years. I've seen a lot of the headlines over the last few days. Um, and it was time. It was time for him to go. So hopefully new things will be coming of this, and whoever they hire is the interim president, and then obviously the president after they probably do a very thorough search. Hopefully we can turn around some things at our great university, because we do love our Temple Owls, not just on the basketball court, but as a whole. So hopefully that they get that right. So we will move on though, back to some basketball, and back to some Big Five, obviously. Villanova associate head coach George Halkovich III. He is going to Buffalo. My parents' alma mater, actually. As my dad always says, the UB Bulls. So a little bit about Halkovich. He spent 15 years on Villanova staff. He was a graduate assistant, then he was a video coordinator, director of basketball ops, assistant coach, and associate head coach. So he went all the way up. He went all the way up the chain there. And Buffalo, in the last decade or so, they've been pretty successful. Nate Oates made 3 tournaments in 4 seasons. They had Bobby Hurley before that, who made, I believe, those 2 straight tournaments. They were a powerhouse of the MAC, and ever since Nate Oates left for Alabama, it's been down. And you're seeing obviously other teams in the MAC like Kent State, like Toledo, who've had some pretty good success over the last few years. So it's important for Buffalo to get back into the position that they were in the MAC, and I think Cal Coolidge can definitely be a great hire for this. Obviously, he learned under Jay Wright all those years and was under Kyle Neptune this year. So what do you make of this? What do you think Halkovich is going to bring to the UB Bulls?
So I mean, he's got experience, like you said, in pretty much every single position that you can have on the college basketball coaching staff. And logically, this is his, and trajectory wise, this is his next step is to take a head coaching job. Talk about how good Buffalo's been. Now, with Jim Whitesell last couple of years, who was an assistant on NATO's staff, it wasn't good. They really didn't even get close to making any tournaments. But before then, like, you've seen just how good they can be as a program in the MAC. It's actually had a little bit of success. 2 years ago, Ohio upset Virginia in the tournament. Jason Preston got drafted in the second round by the Clippers. Not a big conference by any means, and we've seen how good Buffalo's program can be. With that being said, known as a great recruiter, high energy guy, and he's been under Jay Wright for a very, very long time. He's learned from one of the best as well. And anytime that goes for any sport, any great head coach. Look at what happens with Belichick, with Sean McVay. They want to hire the guys that are underneath, those greats, hoping that they can get some of that magic and bring it to their program. So happy for George Halkovich. It's not a bad conference he's going to. They've had some success. Nate Oates, like you said, 3 tournaments, made 2 round of 32s. Those Nick Perkins, C.J. Massenberg, Wes Clark, Jeremy Harris teams, they upset Arizona when they had DeAndre Ayton the one year, and then they actually beat Arizona State the year after while Hurley was there. They smashed them after Arizona State to play in. And while Hurley was there, he made a tournament as well. They were first or tied for first in both his years in the East Division of the MAC conference. But like you said, it's a good conference. Toledo's been really good. Kent State made the tournament this last year. The year before, Akron made the tournament, the Zips. So it's a good conference, but we've seen just how good of a program that it could be. And I think George Halkovich will actually have some success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really excited to see, especially, Jay Wright's obviously one of the best coaches ever. And seeing one of his disciples go on off to Buffalo, especially a university that is dear to me, like I said, because of my family, being graduates of there. It's very exciting to see. So hopefully he has great success up there. Stays warm. It's very, very cold up there in the wintertime. A lot of snow, but he should have some success in the MAC conference, especially with his recruiting abilities. So great for him. All right. I'm very, very excited to talk about this one here. I don't know what I want to say, a friend of the podcast. We obviously don't know the man personally, but someone we've talked about on the podcast before. John Gallagher, former Hartford coach, was kind of done dirty by Hartford there. He's out of coaching last year. He is now going to be the Manhattan Jaspers' new head coach. Now, we've talked about this situation before personally. This is a very, very interesting situation that he's walking into with the Jaspers. So he's replacing Rashawn Stores, who was the coach of this year. He was a former player for Manhattan, under their previous head coach, Steve Masiello. I believe I said his name right. Yep. He was fired a few weeks before the season because there was some issues with Masiello, which I'll let you get into a little bit, but they hadn't made the tournament since 2015, but they were still, fairly successful, but they were consistent under him. And he ended up getting getting fired. Jose Perez, who's the MAAC. I always want to say the MAC, but like when I think of the MAC, I think of the conference that we just talked about with Buffalo. Iona's conference, St. Peter's conference, if you will. He was the preseason player of the year, and he transferred to West Virginia, but was denied a waiver because it was so close to the start of the season. So hopefully he can play there next year. But he the whole thing just kind of fell apart. They had a 12-18 season. They were 10-10 in the MAC. And overall, Steve Masiello was 162, 177 at Manhattan, but it's just the whole situation. It's very, very sad. And I think a lot of the players really, really liked Rashawn Stores, but ultimately they ended up going in a different direction and they hiring John Gallagher, who we love. I think he's a great coach. But I don't know how exactly well received he'll be in Manhattan just because of, what they've been through, especially with Rashawn Stores. So what do you kind of think is going to happen here? What's your breakdown of this whole situation here?
So I got to be honest with you. I'm happy for John Gallagher. He got the job. I'm glad he was able to get back into coaching and get this. But given everything you just said with the administration, I don't love this fit because he just came from a bad administration that clearly didn't support him or his players. Obviously, with everything that happened to Hartford, 12 years there as a head coach, was even there as an associate head coach for a little bit as well. And he got them to their first tournament. They played the American East. They're an extremely small school. And then he gets rewarded by them going down to D3, fights like hell to try and switch the president's thoughts on that. It doesn't happen. And then they had a player get hurt at a scrimmage against Dartmouth College. And that was kind of the final straw for him because the player gets hurt in a scrimmage. Hartford did not send their own trainer. And he got a nasty email from the player's parents. And, it was a whole big thing. He didn't feel support from his administration. And with everything you just outlined, it doesn't sound like that he's going to get that here either. Steve Masiello had been a head coach there for a long time. And he hadn't been good. They won 10 games in conference this year. That was the most they had won since 2015, the last time that the Manhattan Jaspers made the tournament. And Rashawn Stores was a player on that team. They had not been very good the last couple of years. And he gets fired, and Marianne Riley, the athletic director, says, yeah, look at his record. It wasn't great. Why did you fire him then? Didn't give any. It's not great for the players. You don't give them any time to move anywhere. Jose Perez transfers to West Virginia, and shocker, his waiver gets denied and he can't play this year. And then a guy like Rashawn Stores, who had never been a head coach before, gets thrust into that role 2 weeks before the season, and he's got to balance being a first-time head coach with this team that's now losing guys, including the MAC preseason player of the year and Jose Perez. Got to deal with recruiting, all this other stuff, and you give him 2 weeks before he's actually got to get into the grind of the season. I don't love the fit here. And especially, what happened. I say that because if you look at how dirty they did Rashawn Stores, like everything I said, player there from 2012 to 2016. Right after that, takes a year off of basketball, doesn't get right into coaching, gets his master's degree at Manhattan College. Starts as a assistant, then becomes the associate head coach. Obviously, he's an interim last year. And like I said, he as an interim, first time interim head coach with short notice, won them 10 conference games, which was their most in 7-8 years. The players loved him, were advocating a lot for him. And I heard that on Twitter today, if you want any news about this, go to Jaden Daly's page at Daily Dose of Hoops on Twitter. Covers a bunch of mid-majors in the New York, North Jersey area. There was a tweet that he showed up in a suit the day that Gallagher got hired, thinking he'd be a finalist for the job and would basically be going in for a final interview. And when he showed up, they told him he wasn't even a finalist for the job. This is one of their own who the last time this program had any success was a part of it. In an almost impossible situation, made the most of it, and they didn't even give him the job. So you don't have to be mad at John Gallagher. I'm happy for him. I think he deserves this. I think like I said, don't look the fit. I think he'll do a good job there because I think he's a good coach. He's a great character guy as well. But you can say that you're happy for John Gallagher, and you can also say that Rashawn Stores got absolutely screwed over and that you hope he lands on his feet somewhere because he absolutely deserves it. You don't have to hold bad feelings against John Gallagher for that. Manhattan administration botched this as badly as they could have. and they didn't treat one of their own with and Rashawn Stores seemingly with any dignity and respect. So obviously we're big John Gallagher fans here, but with everything that I just said and that just transpired at Manhattan over the last 8 months or so, I don't love this fit for him because I wanted him to go to somewhere with a stable administration, and it doesn't sound like he's going to get it here.
Yeah, I wanted him to build off the success that he had at Hartford, and I know that was a couple of years ago, when he won the ASUN and made the tournament. But it's just, yeah, this is a mess. I mean, this administration in Manhattan is an absolute mess, and I feel bad for him. And to be fair, he did accept the job. He didn't have to accept the job. But at the same time, he wanted to get back in D1 coaching because he deserves it. He's a good coach. Um, I don't know what the right answer is here because, like you said, I'm very happy for John Gallagher. I love that he got another shot, but this might not be the best situation for him. So I really, really hope it does work out, and I hope he has a long, successful career there before maybe even moving up somewhere else. That would be awesome. But I could also see a scenario where it doesn't work out because they don't know what they're doing over there. They obviously don't value the people who have helped make the program once successful. I'm not saying it's been successful over the better part of the last decade, but it was at one point. So I don't know. It's frustrating that we want to be happy for him, but at the same time, like, you have to recognize the situation that was over there in Manhattan. Yeah, it's an interesting one.
The only reason that, and I'm not saying this is a justified reason, but from what I'm seeing on Twitter, the only case you can make for Rashawn Stores not getting the job is that Manhattan just kind of wanted to, I guess, rid themselves of any Steve Masiello holdovers, and they just wanted to start over. I'm not saying it's justified or I agree with it, but I guess that's logically maybe that's the only argument they have in their back pocket. I don't see another reason why you wouldn't just hire Rashawn Stores for the job.
Yeah, I mean, logically that does make sense, but it still doesn't sit right with either of us. That doesn't seem like so. Yeah, I hope John Gallagher does really, really well there, but I do have a little bit of doubts on that. All right, we're gonna move on. Other coaching hires around the country, and we've got some ones that are relevant to the Big Five. So here we go. Mike Rhodes, former VCU coach, is now taken over from Michael Shrewsbury at Penn State, and for the complimentary move of that, Ryan Odom, who is at Utah State, is going down to VCU, take over at VCU. So let's get into a little bit. Mike Rhodes, he's a Mahoney City, Pennsylvania native. It's about 2 hours east of State College. He's known for recruiting athletic defenders. Obviously, VCU has been in the top 50 or so of defense in the country the last few years. He's been a big part of that. He recruited Jameer Watkins from Trenton, Mikael Brown-Jones from Philly, Bones Highland from Wilmington, Delaware. A little bit about him. He played at Lebanon Valley College from 91 and 95. He was also previously the coach at Rice. And he made made 3 tournaments at VCU, but did not play in the 2021 season. That was with Bones Highland because of the COVID outbreak. I believe that was against Oregon, and then Oregon obviously ended up moving on. Did they go to the Elite Eight that year, or was that this past
They
week?
lost in the Sweet 16. They upset Luca Garza's Iowa team, which some people were like, "Oh, well, Oregon was fresh," but then they lost to USC with the Mowgli's in the
Yes, that's what it was. So yeah, he was offered north of $3 million to take this Penn State job. So let's just say that he got the bag a little bit. But his time at VCU was successful, 129 and 61 overall, 72 and 32 in A10 play. And 4 of his 6 years at VCU, they were a top 25 team in points allowed per game. His best offense was only 103rd though, 2017, 2018. So he's not known to be, the best offensive coach, but defensively, I mean, they get after you. Now, the one concern that I've seen from people on Twitter about Penn State is that vastly different styles from Michael Shrewsbury. Michael Shrewsbury, obviously, you saw this Penn State team was lights out on offense. Now, granted, some of that was personnel related. They had Pickett and they had Andrew Funk. and all those guys. And defensively, they weren't awful, but they weren't great. This team is going to be much different, much different under Mike Rhodes. They're going to be a grinded out defensive team, and they might struggle a little bit offensively, but they'll have to see what the staff is around them to hopefully help their offense too. But good hire, bad hire here for Penn State, Cope.
I actually love this for Penn State. I'm a big Mike Rhodes fan. Him being a PA guy, I think is huge when you can go play at the biggest university in this, or coach, excuse me, at the biggest university in the state. And you mentioned guy recruits big athletic defenders, evident by obviously the way they play. You look at the stats, top 25 in points allowed per game 4 of the 6 years there, top 50 defensive efficiency team in KenPom the last 5 years, and top 10 the last 5 years in defensive turnover percentage, which shocks nobody when you talk about a VCU team. So he's going to be bringing some defense, some athleticism, and some toughness to the Big Ten, which is what you're going to need to survive against some really good coaches and some really good programs. So I really like the hire. He's going to be bringing defense there. And he also just hired, let me get this guy's name. He just hired Rowan's head coach to be one of his assistants there. So, as they put a staff together, we'll keep you guys updated if there's any names that are noteworthy. But also mentioned that he gets Jameer Watkins from Jersey. He's got Bo Tyler from Delaware, Mikhail Brown-Jones from Philly. He's recruited down here and kind of in the DMV in the tri-state area a little bit. So I think it's definitely relevant to talk about. Not only is he going to the biggest school in Pennsylvania, but he's also probably going to be recruiting down here, just as Shrewsbury did a little bit. Andrew Funk's a Warrington guy, even though he's at Bucknell. And even before with Pat Chambers was really good at recruiting Philly and Roman Catholic specifically. I'm sure he'll come down here and recruit guys to play up there. But defense, toughness, turnovers, that's what you have coming to you if you're a Nittany Lions fan. Like you said, completely different from the way that Micah Shrewsbury plays, playing up and down, shooting a lot of threes and scoring a lot of points. Going to be a totally different brand of basketball and happy to play. But I love the hire. I think very highly of Mike Rhodes, and not too bad when you can make over $3 million a year, though.
Not too shabby, not too shabby at all. But yeah, I mean, I like the hire a lot too. I think it's going to be obviously very different from what we're used to the last couple of years at Penn State, but I do think he's going to have some success there. So the best of luck to Mike Rhodes.
Kristen, by the way, is the Rowan coach who's going there, and apparently he played at, according to Hoops Weiss, ex-player on for Penn State. We go back to his alma mater, making the move from D3 Rowan back over to Penn State and joining D1. So good for him. And he's going to need a guy from this area who's had a lot of success. Excuse me, if you want to recruit from down here. So I think that's also a really good hire for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's already starting to do things right there. So good for him. Replacing Mike Rhodes at VCU is someone I know that we both like, Ryan Odom. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he was Utah State's head coach this year. They were a 10 seed in the tournament. Mountain West usually doesn't have a ton of success in the tournament. Obviously, San Diego State's debunked that this year. But they were a really good team. They're 44-25 in 2 years under Odom, 21-15 in the Mountain West. And before Utah State, if you remember this, not you, I obviously know you remember this, but everyone watching, he was the coach of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County Ramblers, UMBC, who beat Virginia. Retrievers. Did I say Ramblers? Retrievers. I always got Loyola Chicago on my mind, man. The Retrievers, thank you. Who were the first number 16 seed to beat a number 1 seed in Virginia. Of course, Virginia was the number 1 overall seed in that tournament, but he's had a lot of success. And at UMBC, 97-80, 15-20 in the American East. And he's just a really, really good offensive coach, pretty good defensive coach too. I think this is a really, really good hire at VCU. Again, much different from Mike Rhodes. He's, I think, more of an offensive coach. They ranked 16th and 55th in offensive efficiency in both of his years at Utah State, 15th 3-point percentage this year. Not saying he's a bad defensive coach at all, but it's definitely different than what VCU has been used to the last 6 years. But I do think it's going to be a really good hire. And, he does have some ties to the DMV area too as well. So what do you think of this? I think I know you're going to like it, but I do want to hear your thoughts anyway.
Yeah, so I absolutely love this hire. Besides Rick Pitino going to St. John's, this has been my favorite hire so far of the coaching cycle because he's a terrific offensive coach. You look at the way they shot threes last year. They got a bunch up. It helps when you have some really good 3-point shooters. He and Stephen Ashworth shot almost 43% from three, 53rd nationally in the country this past season. But runs really good. It's a very good offense for shooters. A lot of guys are going to come off screens, get looks that are made and manufactured for them, get threes off the catch, and to have easy catch and shoot shots. So really good offensive guy. They're going to put up threes, and like you said, it's cool because it's going to be a totally different style than what you think of VCU when you think of what Mike Rhodes was doing. And he kept the same identity that Will Wade did, who kept the same identity that Jock Smart had there. They're going to play defense, press, ball pressure in the half court, turnovers, just force and create havoc. And even for a team that's not great offensively, they'll turn you over and they'll make it, and they'll get easy baskets and they'll make it easier for themselves, get an easy offense. Going to be totally different here. Like you mentioned, top 100 in both offense and defense, according to Ken Pom, both years at Utah State. So not a bad defensive coach by any means, but I think people would agree that he's definitely an offensive guy, and it's going to be a lot more fun, and they're going to score a lot more points at VCU than they have the last couple of years. So I love this hire. I think he's a very, very good coach. Will only continue and will probably have a high major job one day for sure because he had the big upset at UMBC. They made the NIT at Utah State last year. They were teetering around, another game or two go their way, they might be a tournament team. But they were in the same position this year. Finished very strong, lost San Diego State in the Mountain West Championship game, ended up getting in the tournament, and then just couldn't make a shot, unfortunately, against Missouri, and that's what ended up being their demise. But I think this is a great hire. I'm telling you, right behind Rick Pitino at St. John's, I think this is the best hire of the offseason cycle so far. I think this guy's a terrific coach, and he's going to bring a totally different style than what VCU fans are accustomed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Very excited to see it. And we're going to see a lot of it, obviously, with two Big Five teams in the Atlantic 10. So we're going to see a lot of Ryan Odom, which I'm excited about. All right, one last hire that is relevant to the Big Five teams. Paul Mills, who's the former head coach of Oral Roberts, well, now the former head coach of Oral Roberts because he's taken over Wichita State. A once great program that's kind of not been so great the last few years. But more on Mr. Mills here. Obviously, Oral Roberts has had some success the last few years. They were a Sweet 16 team in 2021 as a 15 seed. They made the tournament this year, but they lost to Duke. That was just brutal. They just could not make a basket. But they were 16-0 in summit play. I mean, they were legitimately a pretty good team this year. Obviously, replaces Isaac Brown, who's the 2021 American Coach of the Year in his first season. Wichita State made the first four that year. And he signed a 5-year contract with the team and was 13-4 that year, but failed to get halfway through that contract. 7th place finish, 6th place finish, and now he's out of a job, unfortunately. But Paul Mills comes in. He's had some success at the lower levels of Division I college basketball. Now he's coming up to a mid-major level here with Wichita State. And I'm excited to see what happens here. I mean, obviously, I don't want him to have success against the Big Five and Temple in particular, but I do think this is a good hire, and I'll definitely make the league more competitive. So what do you think? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's good for Wichita State getting the guy who coached at Oral Roberts in Tulsa, Oklahoma, from the Midwest to make the move up there. And you're right. I mean, historically, Wichita State's a very good program. It's a shame what happened with the whole Greg Marshall situation because had the undefeated season where they were 34-0 in the regular season, and they played a barn burner game against that Julius Randle Kentucky team. Lost, unfortunately, that team made the championship game and they lost to UConn, but still, that was one of the best college basketball games I've ever watched. Made a Final Four one year, they upset Gonzaga. So and even way before then, this is historically a very, very good program at Wichita State. Isaac Brown has to fill in, and they had a good year during the COVID year. Tyson Etienne, Dexter Dennis, they had some really good players there. Marshall Daisy, who's now at New Mexico. But from there, they lose in the first four. As a game they were leading, they lost at the end, losing to Drake. He signed a 5-year deal. Well, in the middle of the season, they were 13-4. There was a bunch of different COVID pauses, of course, with everybody. Temple fans know that most because it seemed like every other game. I think they played 15 games that year before the conference tournament. So they were in a 3-game COVID pause lull. Signs a 5-year extension. They were 13-4, finished in first place that year. But lost in the conference tournament, which kind of caused them to hold their breath, and then they got in the first four. But 7th place last year, 6th place this year. especially at a place like Wichita State with the history, and they have a great fan base too. They have a terrific fan base that sells out Charles Koch Arena. So they unfortunately they had to make a move even though they'd given Isaac Brown a pretty long contract. And I think Paul Mills will be pretty good here. I think the most interesting part though is Max Asmus still has 1 more year of eligibility. I think it works out for each party. You can play for your old coach, you move up in competition, and while Paul Mills is trying to get a program together, recruit and get players, he knows he is a very good starting point guard from day one. So I think that's interesting to see if Max Asmus could make the move to the AAC. But regardless, I think nothing against Isaac Brown, but I do think Paul Mills hire is definitely an upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. All right. And with that, we're going to move on to some transfers real quick. Well, not transfers, but potential transfers. Well, one transfer. And then the final four. And then we're going to be done with this episode here. All right. Jamil Reynolds, former Temple center. He's getting recruited by the big boys, Cope. He is drawing some interest from the big boys. Kansas in particular is the biggest one. Had a home visit with them and Mississippi State on Tuesday. And he already had home visits with Cincinnati and Arkansas. Obviously, Cincinnati moving to the Big 12, so they are now amongst the big boys once again. But obviously we saw the potential. We saw the talent. He got hurt for a stretch this year, so that kind of hindered things. But we saw the talent come out of UCF. We were excited for him to transfer here. And now he's going to probably play some good minutes with a high major team. I don't know which one yet, but out of the ones that we talked about just now, which one do you think he'd be best suited at?
It might actually be Kansas. I know Arkansas has had tremendous success under Eric Musselman putting transfers together, but I look at some of these teams. I believe Tolu Smith at Mississippi State, who was their leading scorer, he has another year to play. Look at a team like Cincinnati. Odi Aguamo just announced that he was going to come back. Victor Lockett still has some time there. But I look at Kansas, sophomore Zach Clements. He entered the transfer portal, had played sporadically, couldn't really find consistent playing time behind some guys. But this is a team that plays small. KJ Adams at 6'8" he's not a natural center, but he's a big, strong forward that can pass and create some mismatches, and he essentially plays the 5 for them. So behind him, they have Zuby Ejiofor, and they have Ernest Uday, who was a freshman last year. But if you want a guy with some experience, a big physical presence inside that it's going to allow you to play small with the KJ Adams and play with a guy who can pass a little bit and create mismatches, but also play inside with a monster center like Jamil Reynolds. I think Kansas is actually a really solid fit for him. He'll give them a guy who's a bit older at the center position rather than these young guys in Ejiofor and Uday, like I said, coming up. And he just gives them a monstrous presence inside on both ends. It'll allow Kansas to play some different styles. So I think Kansas is actually the most interesting. We know how good they are. They're absolutely dominant force in as good of a conference as we've seen. So I think Kansas is the most interesting spot. It'll allow Bill Self to play some different ways. And this is a place for sure, even with all the great players they have, they're definitely going to add some transfers, bring in some freshmen. As good as a program this is still a place where Jamil Reynolds can play. I know we both speak fairly highly of him. I think of him highly like that as a player. And, as good as a team this is and as good of a conference this is, Jamil Reynolds can absolutely play for the Kansas Jayhawks and be productive for him.
Yeah, he might be saying rock chalk this coming year, and I think it would be good for him, honestly. Obviously, when you have a Hall of Fame coach in Bill Self, you can't really go wrong. But yeah, we'll see what happens with his recruitment. Speaking of recruitments, Caleb Battle, it's not committed anywhere. He did take an in-person visit to UCF once again, moving to the Big 12 this year. And it does look like people think he's going to go there. But he actually said on Twitter himself that anything that comes from anyone else but myself is false. Kind of with the Lamar Jackson route there, just telling everyone that it's going to be him delivering this news whenever this news comes about. I know there's probably not much to comment. We already talked about him a little bit last time, playing under Johnny Dawkins and whatnot, but potentially playing under Johnny Dawkins. But anything you kind of want to say here before we go on to one commitment that actually did happen?
So I guess one little nugget I will say. So Brandon Suggs entered the transfer portal for UCF today. He's a grad transfer. He spent last year at UCF, the previous 3 at East Carolina. started 8 games, played in 32, played just under 20 minutes a game. So for what it's worth, they're going to need another guard. They're going to have a position open there. And when you're moving up to the Big 12, you're going to need everybody. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Although he wasn't like superstar, he was still a guy who played a lot and was a bench contributor. It opens up another guard spot for a guy like Caleb Battle to slide into. So it seems like more on the UCF side, that need for a guy like Caleb Battle might have increased a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We have a Temple player who is no longer with the program now. Unfortunately, Nick Jourdain is moving on. He is going into conference to Penny Hardaway and the Memphis Tigers. Obviously, they are losing super duper duper senior DeAndre Williams. I don't know why I always like to comment on it. It's just funny to me that he was 26 years old in college, but regardless, Penny usually does well with recruiting, and transfer portal is no different there. And Nick Jourdain, I think, is going to have some success there. It's going to be weird seeing him in a Memphis uniform next year when they've had the battles against them the last few years. But what do you think of this move for him?
Yeah, so he's expressed the desire to play more on the perimeter, and they're going to be losing some guys. You lose a guy like DeAndre Williams who can do a lot of different things on both ends of the court. You lose a Kendrick Davis. Of course, not saying Nick Jourdain's going to step into his spot, but you look at a lot of the guys that played, they're losing two of their biggest contributors, as well as some others as well. Elijah McCadden that played on the perimeter, he's out of eligibility after playing a year there. And hey, if you believe in Penny that much that he can kind of recreate your game a little bit, he can help you improve in areas that you need some work, and you think that a really good NBA player can help you develop a perimeter game. And I think it's kind of more an investment in him as a player. He sees what he wants to do. He says, "Hey, I think Penny Hardaway can get me there." I think this is a good move for him. It sucks to see him move in conference. He said he was keeping his options open. He wanted to speak to the Temple coach before making a decision to go elsewhere. But when the decision takes 16 days to hire a head coach, guys are looking elsewhere. People are reaching out to him. They might be taking visits. So I'm not calling him a liar. I'm not blaming him at all. But like I said, I think this is an investment in Nick Jourdain. He, I guess, did not like the way he was being used there, playing as a big guy, having big guy responsibilities when he was in there as a small ball five, especially in the offensive end. Wants to be more of a threat from the perimeter. And if you think Penny Hardaway can get you there, I think for him and in his best interest, this is the best move for him, and you can never knock a guy for doing that. So unfortunately, he's going to a rival. We wish him the best of luck and thank him for everything he did with
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Nick Jourdain. You were definitely a great contributor in the last few years for the Temple Owls. Unfortunately, you guys didn't have as much success as you would have liked to, but hopefully you find that success with Penny Hardaway and Memphis, though not against Temple. Don't do that against Temple, but anyone else, sure. All right, we have we have 3 more games left in the college basketball season, but we have 2 more before we talk about the last one next week, because we're gonna have an episode where we do a championship game preview, obviously. So this is our Final Four preview here in the Big Five pod. We got San Diego State and Florida Atlantic on one side. We got Connecticut and Miami on the other side. We talked briefly about this in our last episode. We're going to get into it a little bit here as we end our episode. I am very, very excited for both of these games. It's very, very intriguing. You got 2 mid-majors on the one side. You got a dominant defense in San Diego State, one of the best in the country. They suffocated the #1 overall team in the country going into the tournament in Alabama. They suffocated a really, really good offensive team in Creighton as well. And then you got Florida Atlantic, who's one of the shortest teams in the country. Obviously, they play in the Conference USA, which, by the way, the Conference USA has dominated the postseason in college basketball. Charlotte won the CBI. You've got North Texas and UAB facing off against each other in the NIT. And then, obviously, Florida Atlantic made the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. So, shout out to the Conference USA. This game is very, very interesting. If I had to take a prediction, I will go with San Diego State just because I don't think Florida Atlantic's seen a defense like this before. They are suffocating, absolutely suffocating. So I am going to go with the Aztecs here. What do you think about this first game, though?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think this is 2 very good games. Contrary to what people believe, I feel like a lot of the people that don't love these matchups are just casual fans that
Oh,
have
yeah.
never heard of Florida Atlantic before, or know about San Diego State just from hearing Kawhi Leonard talk about them in their media broadcast. Like, I think if you're an actual fan of the sport, like, you actually realize these are two, especially the next game we're going to talk about. I think these are two awesome games. I'm going to roll with San Diego State as well. It's not only the defense, but I just love the way this team plays. Now, both these teams are deep. San Diego State's 30th in bench minutes. Florida Atlantic's 15th. They're deep. They have shooters. In the case of San Diego State, they have size. Jadon Ladiz played really well. Nathan Mensah actually played a terrific game on Ryan Kalkbrenner on Sunday in their Elite Eight win against Creighton. But the thing I really like about the San Diego State team is, and it's not only the defense, they grind you to a halt. They make you play at their pace. They don't allow you to make the game a track meet. San Diego State's going to play slow. They're going to play a low scoring game. They're going to control defensive end. But the thing I love the most about this team is that they're older and anybody on the team is capable of being their leading scorer every night. Lamont Butler, Matt Bradley, Micah Parrish, Darion Trammell. Each of these guys has led the team in scoring in each of their 4 games they've played so far in the tournament. It's been a different guy every game. Everybody on the team's capable of doing it. They get contributions from everybody. They have fresh legs. They don't get tired. I love San Diego State in this game. I think size is definitely going to bother um, Florida Atlantic, in this game. I think Vlad Golden's going to have his hands full, especially in the offensive end. You got to go up against Nathan Mensah, the 2-time Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. 6 blocks in the second half against Alabama was spectacular. I think Nathan Mensah bothers Vlad Golden a little bit, forces the guards to have to score more. But on both sides, there's a lot of really good guards. Elijah Martin's played very well for Florida Atlantic. Brian Greenlee made a bunch of threes in the K-State game. Donnell Davis has been awesome throughout the entire season and had some big games in the tournament as well. And then on the side of San Diego State, Trammell's been big. Matt Bradley's kind of been off, but that's another thing that makes San Diego State scary. It's like they've had one game against Charleston where Matt Bradley led them in scoring, and they've won against damn good teams the other 3 games. So I'll take San Diego State here. Deep defense. Anybody can lead you in scoring. Anybody can hurt you on the floor at one time. And I think they'll play Monday night for a championship game. The Mountain West had never made a Final Four until this year. And I think they'll be 40 minutes away from a championship come Saturday night.
I agree. And yeah, I mean, I did want to ask if you didn't mention Bradley, I was going to mention him, that he hasn't really scored the ball like at all the last couple games, especially. And I think that's going to be instrumental in their success against not just Florida Atlantic, but whoever they would play between Connecticut and Miami if they do advance to the championship game. But the fact that a Mountain West team might be 40 minutes away, either a Mountain West team or a Conference USA team is going to be 40 minutes away from a national championship is awesome. This is what the tournament's all about. This is why we play these games. This is why it's the most grueling 6-game schedule you could ever think of. Very, very excited. But we do have to get into the other match too. Same match, like soccer. Connecticut versus Miami is the other game. Obviously, UConn has dominated teams in this tournament. I believe their average margin of victory is 23, something like that. I know their lowest win differential was 15 points against St. Mary's, which is mind-boggling. But this Miami team is gutsy, absolutely gutsy. They were down 13 in the second half against Texas, who you can make the case that they were arguably the best 2 seed. I'd probably put UCLA above them going in, but if you wanted to say second best, that's fair too. So you're saying the 6th best team in the country. And they just came all the way back. Obviously, they're led by, their 3 guards. You got Isaiah Wong, you got Jordan Miller, you got Nigel Pack. And it's Jim Laranaga's got these guys rolling. They're an incredible team, but I think it's just going to be too tough of a matchup against UConn. And, I know we just talked about the guards and they play through the guards, and UConn's best player is Adamas Onogo, who's obviously a big, but I just think the depth of UConn's guards is insane. Like, maybe they don't have a player who's as good as Isaiah Wong, right? But they have Calcaterra, they have Hawkins, they have why am I blanking on his name right now? Andre. What's Andre's last name? Why am I blanking?
Andre
Thank you.
Jackson.
I was gonna say Jackson. Oh my God. It's almost midnight. I've been up for a while. It's fine. But you also got Caravan too. I mean, they are loaded. They are loaded in the backcourt and, on the wing too. And then obviously you got Sanogo. And then as we talked about last episode, Donovan Clingan comes off the bench and he's just a monster. And I think that they're not going to be able to handle that. And I think defensively, UConn's going to get after him too. And ultimately, I do think it's going to be a close game. I believe the spread for this is 5.5. I do think, if you're talking about betting, Miami can potentially cover this and keep it that close is the perspective I was trying to offer there. But I do ultimately think UConn will be playing once again on a national championship game. What's your takeaway on this Final Four matchup?
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to take UConn in a very close game. The size could be a problem, with Norchad Omier, a big physical presence, one of the best rebounders in the sport, not only this year, but since he's been in college basketball for years. But he's got a tendency to play aggressive and foul. I thought he should have fouled out in the Texas game. They instead called a foul on Brock Cunningham for undercutting him. And when you have a guy in Omier who plays way bigger than his height, of course, but only being 6'7", you got to play against a Sanogo. You got to play against a Donovan Clingan, huge. You're undersized here. You're going to have to play more physical against these dudes. If he gets in foul trouble, Miami could be in trouble. Obviously, Jordan Miller was spectacular. He didn't miss in the last game. But I think this is where maybe size catches up to Miami a little bit with the bigs. They're deep. They're going to be able to rotate guys in and out. And they're just – UConn is so complete. They have shooting. Hawkins, Calcaterra, Tristan Newton can shoot it. Naeem Aline can shoot it coming off the bench. They have the size in Sanogo and Clingan, like we talked about. Big defensive forwards like Alex Caravan and Andre Jackson. And Andre Jackson's a jack of all trades that can help you in a bunch of different ways. So I'm going to roll with UConn here. As good as the guards have been for Miami. I mean, Isaiah Wong's been great. Nigel Packard, 7 threes that were part of 26 points against Houston. Their guards are dynamite. I think this is a really good game, but ultimately UConn wins, and it's their championship to lose. They are so complete. Started out the year 14-0, and you saw a glimpse of just how dominant they can be. And I'm going to take UConn to beat Miami here, but it's a great game regardless. I think it'll be close, but what a terrific game it is.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolutely great game. I'm very, very excited for it. And I think however way these two games shaked out, we're going to have a very, very intriguing championship. Even more so, if you flip the results that we just predicted, if it's Miami versus Florida Atlantic, could you imagine an all South Florida matchup? I mean, that would be absolutely insane. But I'm really, really excited. It's, obviously the most competitive weekend of the year, if you include the Monday too, obviously for the championship game. But it's just going to be great. And it's a cultivation of the entire season. And I'm sad that after this, that's only one game left, but I'm also happy because, we're going to be able to witness this. It's another year of a Final Four. I don't know if it's going to top last year's Final Four, though. I mean, last year's Final Four is pretty great, right?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. I think I was out of town that weekend and didn't watch, so I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll take your word for it, though.
All right, guys.
Playing a football stadium, yeah.
For anyone who's watching this, there is probably not a week that goes by that I don't tease Copestick about the Caleb Love shot. Now, Caleb Love's leaving UNC, so it's not as great as it was a year ago, but man, it is still funny, and it always will be. I just had to bring that up too. And you also talk about Jay Wright's last game too at Nova, but which is sad, obviously.
That's probably the worst day I've ever had as a fan. And I saw the Broncos lose 43-8 in the Super Bowl. And somehow I think last year's Final Four was worse.
I mean, those are your two favorite teams, so it makes sense.
Both my favorite coaches who I don't remember what college basketball is like without them, be done within a couple hours of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a tough day for you. But yeah, I'm hoping this Final Four is just as exciting, if not more, from at least the basketball perspective. So yeah, that's all we got here. Make sure you guys subscribe on our YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Big Five Pod. Make sure you listen to our audio only versions, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And make sure you have yourselves an incredible weekend of Final Four watching. And baseball watching too during the day, because there's going to be some, the games aren't on until night. There's going to be some baseball on. So enjoy it. We'll talk to you guys on Monday for the national championship preview. And until then, adios.